Michael Olise's refusal to don the title celebration shirt, his conspicuous absence from the championship squad photograph in front of the South Stand, and his general disappearance from Bayern Munich's Bundesliga title festivities have the internet turning on him, and it appears even Vincent Kompany is privately aligned with the growing sentiment surrounding his star. Winger. On April 19, 2026, Bayern Munich overpowered VfB Stuttgart 4-2 at the Allianz Arena as the ground drowned in red and white smoke, and the Bavarians formally reclaimed their throne, locking down their 35th German League championship with 4 games still remaining, having triumphed in 25 of their 30 outings, and the title was wrapped up. The moment to celebrate had arrived. Bayern's staff had readied special commemorative shirts, emblazoned with a porcelain cockatoo illustration, a mascot that had blossomed into a cult symbol of success under Kompany, stretching back to the previous season's triumph, and the expectation was simple. Every single player pulls it on, the squad unites as one, and everyone lines up for the photograph in front of the South Stand, which is exactly what happened, except for one man. Despite the exhilarating party atmosphere engulfing the Allianz Arena following the 4-2 victory over Stuttgart, one individual stood out for entirely the wrong reasons, as Olise, 24, maintained a strikingly low profile throughout the proceedings, remaining in his standard match jersey while every one of his teammates changed into the specially produced championship shirts, making him the only Munich player to reject the communal outfit, and matters only deteriorated from there, as the Frenchman was entirely missing from the landmark squad photograph in front of the South Stand, an image in which every other Bayern player and every member of Kompany's coaching and support staff willingly participated, leaving Olise visible only as a distant background figure in the club's own celebratory social media posts. At virtually any other club, this might have drifted past without serious scrutiny. But Bayern Munich is an institution built on the bedrock of collective identity, and Olise is far from an ordinary squad member. He is arguably the single most decisive creative influence on the team this season, with the attacking unit of Harry Kane, Olise, and Luis Diaz combining for 95 goal contributions, Olise personally commanding the Bundesliga's assist chart with 18, while Kane stands as the runaway Golden Boot frontrunner. And for a player of that stature to openly rebuff the celebration shirt and vanish from the team photograph, people noticed, people talked, and people wanted answers. The thing is, this was not a first offense, nor even a second, because ever since his arrival at Bayern, Olise has repeatedly generated attention through his distinctive conduct, dazzling and expressive between the white lines, yet curiously withdrawn and almost aloof away from them. And supporters with long memories at the club will not have been remotely shocked by title night, given they already witnessed a near-identical scene the previous season, when Olise bypassed posing with the championship trophy during the CO balcony celebrations at Munich City Hall, instead choosing to play online chess on his phone while tens of thousands of supporters filled Marienplatz below him, roaring in adulation during a Bundesliga title party, and let that image genuinely register for a moment. In nearly 2 full years at Bayern, the Frenchman has been repeatedly labeled Mr. Nonchalant, spectacular, and theatrical on the pitch, yet projecting an almost performative coolness and visible disinterest off it, and the pattern reaches even further back than his time in Bavaria, all the way to his very first press conference as a Bayern signing, where he looked and sounded like a man who would genuinely prefer to be elsewhere. Though Premier League observers were entirely unsurprised by his amusingly monosyllabic exchanges with journalists, because it is simply his nature. Place a microphone in front of Olise and he shuts down completely, place him on a football pitch, and he communicates with a fluency and elegance that rivals any player in the world today. He is, by his own admission, a footballer who believes his answers must be delivered on the grass first and foremost, which is a sentiment that carries genuine nobility in isolation, but looks considerably less admirable when an entire squad is celebrating in unison and one player is conspicuously, physically standing apart, particularly at a club whose motto, Mia San Mia, meaning we are who we are, is an explicit declaration of collective over individual identity. The social media backlash was ferocious, with supporters circulating clips and images of Olise hovering on the edges of the festivities, some branding it outright disrespect toward the institution, while others treated his body language as an unmistakable signal of impending departure. And with transfer speculation linking him to Liverpool, Real Madrid, and various other elite clubs having swirled for months, his conduct on title night abruptly became the prosecution's star exhibit, all of which was further inflamed by an incident from just 1 week earlier at St. Pauli, where for perhaps the first time in his Bayern career, Olise became the most unpopular player on the pitch during a 5-0 victory, having shoved opponent Joel Chimafuje after the whistle following a fractious first-half exchange, landing squarely in the crosshairs of the home supporters, before doubling down on the hostility directed at him by scoring and provocatively gesturing toward the crowd, amplifying the ill feeling considerably, so that by the time title night arrived, a gathering narrative had already taken shape around a player who appeared to operate entirely by his own rulebook, refused to conform, and projected utter indifference toward outside opinion, with the celebration shirt refusal and the skipped photograph simply pouring fuel onto a fire that was already burning. The club has offered no public explanation for why Olise declined both the shirt and the photograph. But to genuinely appreciate the complexity of what unfolded on title night, you have to first understand how irreplaceable Olise has been to this Bayern side, and why Kompany's response or studied absence of one carries such serious weight. Because Olise has produced a season for the ages, scoring 17 goals and registering 29 assists across 42 appearances for the club. And those are not merely impressive figures, they are generational. No winger across Europe's Big Five leagues has been directly involved in more goals across all competitions in 2025-26. No player has delivered more assists, and by every quantifiable measure, he stands as the most creative attacking force in European football this season, having already surpassed his own sensational debut Bundesliga tally of 27 goal contributions with 4 matches still to play, while simultaneously tearing through the Champions League with 4 goals and 7 assists to propel Bayern to the semi-finals, and chipping in with 2 goals and 2 assists in the DFB Pokal. This is a player who arrived at the club under genuine scrutiny, with Bayern's decision to spend 60 million euros on him from Crystal Palace in the summer of 2024, drawing considerable skepticism from pundits, given he had been twice sidelined by hamstring injuries during his final season at Selhurst Park, even as Thierry Henry loudly insisted. Bayern had secured a bargain, yet the gamble paid off in ways nobody could have credibly foreseen, as Olise immediately shrugged off the burden of expectation in his debut Bundesliga campaign, scoring 20 goals across all competitions and registering a further 23 assists to become the only Bayern player to appear in all 34 rounds of their title triumph, earning a place in the Bundesliga Team of the Season and claiming the league's Rookie of the Year award. Before his second season proved even more devastating, with Kane repeatedly hailing his seemingly effortless capacity to glide beyond defenders, and Diaz himself a player of extraordinary technical refinement, simply stating that Michael destroys you in one-on-one situations. When a player of that standing does something that fractures the harmony of a title celebration, it presents the head coach with an acute and uncomfortable dilemma. Do you publicly reprimand your most gifted creator and risk destabilizing the very chemistry that has powered your entire season? Or do you remain silent and invite the perception that one player exists above the collective? And this is precisely the tightrope Kompany has been forced to navigate, the one the internet desperately wants to see him tumble from. Kompany is not a manager who surrenders his composure in public, and even on title night, for all his warmth, there was a visible inner resolve and a determination to keep one eye firmly fixed on the larger picture in a season that still holds the prospect of a treble, and he showed minimal appetite for discussing a title party when so many decisive fixtures remained a telling detail. Because while the outside world was consumed by what Olise did or failed to do after the final whistle, Kompany's attention was already elsewhere, stating plainly that right now he only wants to win against Leverkusen and that he cannot yet allow himself to think about being a treble-winning coach, because he understands exactly what it means to play in a final or a semi-finale. The broader context of Kompany's relationship with Olise renders this even more layered, because just days before title night, ahead of the Champions League second leg against Real Madrid, Kompany had gone to considerable lengths to lavish extraordinary praise on the Frenchman, describing him as someone who performs at the highest level in the Champions League day after day, and declaring he will surely be among the best players in the world one day, while adding a caveat that in retrospect takes on a pointed resonance, noting that if he called him the best right now, people would ask how many titles he has won, and that he simply needs to keep going as he has over the last 18 months, which is a subtle but unmistakable message. Sustained excellence, and the manner in which you conduct yourself when the results arrive, is precisely what separates good players from legendary ones. Kompany has not publicly addressed Olise's behavior on title night, but everything about his approach throughout the season, the insistence on collective identity, the deliberately abbreviated celebrations, the laser focus on the treble, paints the portrait of a manager who runs an exceptionally tight operation and does not take distractions lightly. With the Sunday night festivities stripped of the customary wheat beer showers, effectively deferred until the final league fixture against Cologne on May 16th, a clear signal from Kompany that this was a moment to acknowledge but not to indulge. Given a DFB Pokal semi-final against Leverkusen and a Champions League semi-final against PSG, we're already looming a framework within which Olise's apparent detachment reads rather differently. Not as disrespect, but as a player who, much like his manager, had no desire to celebrate a job that remained only half finished. And here is where the dressing room's defense of Olise becomes enormously significant, because teammates consistently maintain that he is merely guarded in public settings, that he laughs and converses freely with everyone behind the scenes, with center-back Jonathan Tah delivering perhaps the most illuminating detail of all, by revealing that Olise is the leader of the squad's WhatsApp group. And sit with that contradiction for a moment, because the man who will not wear the celebration shirt, who absents himself from the team photograph, who appears to drift through public ceremony on his own orbital path, is privately the central node of the squad's day-to-day communication, which is emphatically not the portrait of someone who has disengaged, but of someone who simply refuses to perform enthusiasm for the benefit of a camera. Sporting director Max Eberl had already publicly defended Olise's temperament in the aftermath of the Sreet Polly episode, acknowledging his emotions while framing them as an inseparable component of what makes him such an exceptional footballer, and insisting they belong within the natural theater of a football match. And the club's internal stance could not be clearer. Protect Olise, understand him, channel him, and resist any impulse to fundamentally alter him. So, did Kompany lose it on Olise? What can be stated with certainty is that Kompany is steering a squad in active pursuit of a treble, having already secured the Bundesliga and the Franz Beckenbauer Super Cup, with a DFB Pokal semi-final against Leverkusen imminent, and a Champions League semi-final against PSG on April 28th bearing down. This is a manager who, after Bayern eliminated Real Madrid at the Bernabeu for the first time in over a decade, instructed his players to remain composed and described the dressing room as very, very calm, a manager who, with characteristic understatement, compared that seismic Champions League victory over Real Madrid to beating Blackburn Rovers during his time at Burnley. And that is simply not the temperament of a man who unravels over a player declining to wear a commemorative t-shirt. Kompany grasps something the social media outrage machine perpetually fails to comprehend, that what unfolds behind closed doors carries infinitely more consequence than what plays out in front of cameras, that the real conversation is the private one in which he tells Olise precisely what is expected of him at this club, not a public confrontation engineered for viral consumption. Because days before title night, Bayern had dismantled Real Madrid across two legs in one of the most gripping Champions League ties in recent memory, with Madrid taking the lead 3 separate times only to be undone when Eduardo Camavinga's late red card allowed the German champions to close the contest out, the aggregate ending 6-4, with Bayern marching into the Final Four and Olise, fresh from helping eliminate the so-called kings of the competition, produced a moment of interview brilliance that swept across the internet, when a reporter used that very phrase and he simply smirked and repeated it back as a dry, deadpan question. King of the competition, which is the Olise paradox distilled to its purest form. A player who will not pull on a shirt for a photograph, but will score the goals that matter most, deliver the assists that rewrite record books, and stare down Real Madrid on the grandest stage in club football without so much as blinking. His commitment on the pitch is beyond question. It is his relationship with the rituals surrounding the pitch that generates the friction and the uncomfortable truth the internet resists. Acknowledging is that Kompany almost certainly does not care about the t-shirt, because Kompany cares about winning, about the Champions League semi-final against PSG, about the DFB Pokal, about whether Olise can conjure another world-class performance against Leverkusen. And Olise's original decision to join Bayern was not driven by finances, but by his connection with Kompany and the club's culture of winning, with the two understood to have reached a deep mutual understanding over vision and playing philosophy that 2 years on appears to be holding firm precisely where it counts most. Olise himself has stated that every time he sees the Bayern badge on his shirt, he feels part of something genuinely significant, that there is a great deal more still to come, that he is not simply chasing trophies but wants to rise to the defining moments, make history with this team, and leave a legacy, and if that were not his ambition, he insists, he would simply be in the wrong place. So did Kompany lose it on Olise? Nobody beyond that dressing room can say with any certainty, But what can be said is that Kompany is managing a squad that has shattered the all-time Bundesliga goals record by netting a staggering 109 times this league season, obliterating the previous benchmark of 101 set by the legendary 1971-72 side, leading a team that has eliminated Real Madrid and is chasing history on three fronts with a 2-4-year-old Frenchman at the very epicenter of that charge, a man who dislikes group photographs but leads the WhatsApp group, who refuses the celebration shirt but leads the league in assists, who shuts down in front of a microphone but dismantles defenses for Sport and Vincent Kompany, for all his discipline and structural precision, appears to understand that managing unconventional brilliance sometimes demands that you choose your battles carefully, and choose them behind closed doors rather than in front of a lens. Because the real test was never title night. The real test is what arrives next Wednesday against Leverkusen, then PSG, then, if the stars align, a Champions League final, and if Olise delivers in those moments, which his entire body of work insists he will, then title night will be remembered as exactly what it deserves to be, a footnote in an extraordinary season. And if he does not, well, then the conversation takes a very different shape entirely. But for now, the only thing Vincent Kompany has lost is any appetite for discussing parties, because there is still a treble to win.